In this video, I'm covering more awesome rares and mythics from Secrets of Strixhaven preview season that you absolutely want to open in your pre-releases or in your drafts because they can win you games single-handedly and are fantastic additions to your deck that you really should try to include if possible. First up is Slumbering Trudge. It's X green for a 6/6 plant beast. This creature enters with a number of stun counters on it equal to 3 minus X. If it enters with a stun counter on it, tap it. So for a single green mana, you can get a 6/6 creature that does come with 3 stun counters on it. So if you play this on turn 1, then on turn 2, it'll lose the first stun counter. On turn 3, it'll lose the second stun counter. And on turn 4, it'll lose the third stun counter, which means that by turn 5, you have your 6/6 ready to go. Which might not seem crazy, but the fact that you still only paid a single green mana for a 6/6 creature is still a big deal. It's almost like playing a card with Suspend, or just this kind of delayed gratification type thing, where you spend such a little amount of mana and then just get a huge impact on the board state in just a few turns. If you do draw this in the later stages of the game, you can of course play this for 4 mana, and then it'll with 3 minus 3, so it'll get 0 stun counters. You just get a 4 mana 6/6, which is also a huge creature. But where this is really going to be devastating, I think, is going to be in those opening hands where you play this and your opponent's just like, oh my gosh, in like 4 turns, the board state is going to completely flip. My opponent's getting like 5 or 6 mana worth of stats for just this 1 mana and this time investment. And oftentimes in Limited, you're not doing anything on turn 1 anyway, so it's not like you're like playing your Slumbering Trudge instead of a creature that affects the board state or something like that. And so overall, just a really fantastic card and just totally scary. When I first read this card, I did a double take because I was like, oh my gosh, this card's crazy, and definitely one you should be trying to include, even though it doesn't have any abilities once it's a creature. Being a 6/6 and keyword huge is kind of ability enough. Next up is Antiquities on the Loose. It's 1 white for a sorcery. It says create 2 2/2 red and white spirit creature tokens. Then if this spell was cast from anywhere other than your hand, put a +1/+1 counter on each spirit you control, and then it has flashback for 4 white. So 3 mana to get 2 2/2 creatures is already a good rate. It's 4/4 worth of stats spread across 2 bodies. White can sometimes be tricky on your mana depending on your exact deck, but that's still a good rate. And the fact that when you flash it back for 6 mana, you're getting 2 2/2s and then putting a counter on each of your spirits means that you're getting at the bare minimum 2 3/3s. But if your other 2/2s that you made before are hanging around, then you get to put a counter on those as well. So for 9 mana, you can get 4 3/3 creatures, and you can spread that out over a couple of turns. So like you cast this on turn 5, then on turn 6, you flash it back. You have 4 3/3 creatures. That's just so much stats for 1 card. And even though it does require a decent amount of mana, the fact that you're getting a good rate on the front by getting 2 2/2s for 3 mana, that's a good rate. And the fact that you get flashback it and get 2 3/3s, which is kind of close to being a good rate too. Like 2 3/3s for 6 mana is a pretty decent card. And the fact that the counters can get spread to your spirits, and you might have other cards to make spirits, so you can get even more value out of this. It's just a really scary card and kind of army in a can type thing, so where you have 1 card that just gets you so much impact on the board. This is the sort of card that can be really scary. And a lot of decks can't really deal with it that effectively because it doesn't really get dealt with by spot removal. The 3/3s are going to kind of have to be dealt with individually or like taken down in some sort of like that you would like block them with a couple 2/2s and try to like incrementally nickel and dime them away, because you can't just like spend a kill spell on each of the 3/3s or they're just gonna like run away with the game. So Antiquities on the Loose, really scary card. Also works well with like things that can maybe like mill cards from your library into your graveyard, fill your graveyard, because if you ever flip this over from something and just it gets into your graveyard from other means, you're gonna love it because you just get that flashback mode for free essentially. Or not for free, you don't get to cast it for free, but you don't have to like take a card from drawing in your hand, which you don't mind casting anyway. It's just a great card. Next up is Skycoach Conductor, a little bit less flashy, but still really, really good. And I expect it to have a really positive impact on winning games. For 2 and a blue, you get a 2/3 flash flyer with Vigilance that enters prepared. And then its prepared spell is All Aboard, which is an instant that says exile target non-pilot creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Now, a lot of the time with Skycoach Conductor, because it's a rare, your opponent's not going to play around it a ton. So your opponent's going to like attack in with their 2/2 creature, you flash in a Skycoach Conductor, block that creature, and you just end up with a nice 2-for-1, and then a 2/3 flyer with Vigilance that's just chipping in every single turn and really like just chipping in, like contributing to the game. You got your 2-for-1 out of it. You can also save this and use it as a counter spell of sorts. If your opponent is going to be like destroying one of your creatures, assuming it's not a pilot, there's not a ton of pilots in this set, you flash in the Skycoach Conductor, cast All Aboard immediately, save your like exile your own creature that was going to get killed by a removal spell, bring it back. All of a sudden you basically use this as a counter target removal spell and get a 2/3 flyer with Vigilance. And so those 2 flexibilities are really nice modes to have available with like regard to your opponent is probably not going to be like, you're probably going to get a 2-for-1 out of this card. It is not that big of a mana investment. You can also cast this card and then like exile one of your other creatures if it has a good enters effect or something like that. That's another good way to get value from this card. Or you can just play this as a 2/3 flyer, chip in, and then your opponent kind of has to kill this first, because the all aboard will protect any of your other creatures. Because if you've cast this thing already, holding up a single blue mana to protect your other creatures isn't that difficult. Overall, really nice card. And even though it's not the flashiest, it's the sort of thing where if you win by an inch or you win by a mile, you're still winning. And this card's going to help you win by an inch in a lot of games, I think, which is really, really nice. Next up is Magma Blood Archaic. This card is really sweet and is going to lead to some awesome plays. It's two red, kind of hybrid mana. So you can cast this for triple red, or 2 red, or 2 red, those kind of combinations. You get a 2/2 avatar with trample and reach, and it has converge. This creature enters with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. So in a lot of cases, if you're playing a 2-color deck, let's say you're playing this in blue-red, you'll use one of the like hybrids to just be like blue and like blue-red or whatever you want. And then you can cast this for like 4 mana and get a 4/4 because you're using red for one of the colors. So if you just do triple red, it's going to get 1 counter on it. But if you use like blue-red, that'll be a couple of counters on it for 4 mana. And if you are splashing, like you're playing this in like a red-blue deck that's splashing green, or a red-white deck that's splashing black, or some sort of thing like that, then you can maybe get 3 counters on it depending on how you're going to use that hybrid mana. Now, it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. So let's just say you're getting a 4 mana 4/4 trample with reach a lot of the time. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn for each color of mana spent to cast that spell. So if you have Magma Blood Archaic in play and your opponent hasn't killed it, you're just going to be able to get a massive board influence anytime you cast an instant or sorcery. Giving your creatures +2/+0 is going to be like pretty much the default with that, because if you're casting like a 2 mana spell, you're going to be playing a multicolor that you're not going to be playing like mono red generally. You're going to be playing like blue red or something like that. And so you can just cast it for a blue and a red, and all of a sudden you get like giant buff. It doesn't mean that you have to have a multicolored spell. If you're just spending colors of mana to cast your spells, that's what's going to be the thing that counts. And so if you're splashing, this gets crazy because you can give things like +3/+0 for casting expensive spells. But even in just a 2-color deck, giving your creatures +2/+0 whenever you cast an instant or sorcery is just so much damage. It just turns your 2/2s into 4/2s, which just doubles their power. It just puts so much pressure on your opponent. And if they don't kill the Magma Blood Archaic, if you get to like untap with this with like any reasonable board state, you can just start attacking with all of your creatures. This has trample, so even if they do block it down, if you do cast a big spell, you can just trample over for damage, buff all your other creatures. You can hold this back, so just like the threat of activating it, like casting a spell, buffing all your other creatures. It's just like a really scary card, and also a really sweet one because there's so much modality involved with playing it. It is, of course, the classic where if they kill it immediately, it doesn't provide instant value like some of the cards we've already talked about, but it's going to lead to some really flashy plays and win games in style and with some like real like boosts that other cards aren't going to be able to provide to your board state. Before I get to the next cards, I do want to talk about another way to prepare for pre-releases other than just watching my videos and like getting my thoughts on the cards. I am doing a group coaching session this coming Sunday, April 12th. Which you can find the information for in the description and down below. It's going to be where I go through which college you should pick for your pre-release. I cover like key cards to look for that get better in pre-releases compared to like in draft or things like that. I cover cards that you should be playing around. We're going to be doing a build together. I'm going to do sealed tips and tricks, and then of course plenty of time for questions with folks in the session. So if you're interested in that, you can find that linked in the description down below, just as another way to help you prepare for your pre-release event the following weekend after this weekend. Next up with cards is Ambitious Augmenter. Back to our single green snowballer cards. It's green mana for a 1/1 turtle wizard. It has increment. Whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana you spent is greater than this creature's power or toughness, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. When this creature dies, if it had 1 or more counters on it, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, then put this creature's counters on that token. So it's the sort of card where if you play it on turn 1, it can absolutely kind of take over a game because you're getting way more stats than the mana that you're investing in. If you play this on turn 1, turn 2 you play a 2-drop, turn 3 you play a 3-drop, all of a sudden your Ambitious Augmenter is already a 3/3. And has a potential to keep growing over the course of the game. That's obviously the dream scenario, but a lot of the times your decks are going to be set up to cast a 2-drop on turn 2, cast a 3-drop on turn 3. And so just getting a card that can just immediately start snowballing the game. And then when it dies, you're still going to be able to get something out of it. If it trades off with something, you're still ahead because you're left with like a 3/3 or a 2/2, depending on how many counters were on the Augmenter. And you only invested a single mana into this card that has now provided you with not only a bunch of stats, hopefully a bunch of damage, but also a little bit of value too, because it died into another resource that can trade with something your opponent does. If you top deck this later in the game, it still does have the potential to grow a little bit. It's not going to be as relevant, but these snowball cards are so good when you have them at the beginning of the game that it's oftentimes going to be worth the downside of them being a little bit worse later in the game. And this still can do some stuff. Getting a one that can get a couple counters, maybe it'll become like a 3/3 even in the later stages of the game, and then dies into something. It's still going to be relevant, though it's not going to apply quite as much pressure. Still a really good and scary card. And these snowball cards are definitely best evaluated, best at their best when you have them in your opening hands. Next up is Arc of Hunger. It's 2 red white for an artifact. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, this artifact deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. And it has tap, mill a card, you may play that card this turn. And the fact that it says play means that you can play lands off of this, and then you can just play whatever spells you get off of this as well. This card's really scary for if your opponent plays this and you don't have artifact removal, which a lot of decks don't have access to artifact removal, because it's just going to basically at that point in the game draw your opponent, or draw you if you're playing it, an extra card every single turn in almost any game that's going to eventually win you the game, because it just gets you so much snowballing advantage. And the fact that when you are playing those cards from your graveyard, it doesn't have to be just the card you play from Arc of Hunger. Just any card leaves your graveyard, you deal 1 damage to the opponent and you gain 1 life. That 1 life in particular is really relevant, because if you have Arc of Hunger and you kind of play it on turn 4 and you're under some pressure, there's this risk that your opponent can defeat you before you're able to fully leverage the card advantage you're getting from the Arc of Hunger. However, because the fact that you're gaining a life every time you get to play one of those cards means that Arc of Hunger can maybe gain you 4 life or 3 or 4 life over the course of the game as you're playing the lands you mill off of it, playing the spells you mill off of it. And that 3 or 4 life can be the difference in stabilizing and not stabilizing, because you're putting yourself a little bit behind when you play a 4-drop that doesn't affect the board state. It doesn't have stats, it doesn't have power and toughness, and so it can't block and protect you. But that life gain can offset that to some degree and help you stabilize in a game, and then use the cards that Arc of Hunger is generating to just pull away with the game. The fact that it lets you play those cards from your graveyard can also let you trigger other cards in red-white that care about cards leaving your graveyard. The 1 life and 1 damage can also add up if you are playing other cards that make cards leave your graveyard. And overall, it's just a really good card for red-white decks, and of course can also be something that you maybe splash. If you're playing a blue-red deck, you can maybe splash this card as well, just getting yourself that extra value. And don't sleep on the damage. If you are playing an aggressive deck and you want some extra, and you have Arc of Hunger in your deck, the extra damage can actually add up as well, almost being an unblockable point of damage, or maybe even 2 points of damage a turn, depending on the other synergies. So this card's just really scary, really powerful, and even a pretty good splash candidate for certain decks if you have the fixing, because it's just going to be able to take over the game so easily and get you so much card advantage. Next up is Grave Researcher. It's 2 and a black for a 3/3 Troll Warlock. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1. Then if there are 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard, this creature becomes prepared. And then the prepared spell is Reanimate. Put target creature card from a graveyard, so yours or your opponent's, onto the battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to that card's mana value. So Grave Researcher is one of those classic cards that says, if you do not kill this card, I will win the game. That's pretty much how this card reads, and it doesn't necessarily do that really as early. Maybe it's kind of look out for more of a mid-game or late-game threat in that regard, because you're not going to have the 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard until the mid or late game. But that's also often the point where your opponent has kind of exhausted all of their removal spells, and this as a last threat is just going to take over a lot of games. The fact you can reanimate cards from your opponent's graveyard, and then the next turn you're still going to have those 3 creature cards in your graveyard, it's going to get prepared again. So you're going to be spending life to reanimate things, but you're going to be able to take over the board state in a hurry if you can keep Grave Researcher alive. And it's just a really kind of scary card to see if you're your opponent. And don't sleep on the fact that surveilling 1 every upkeep is also really good in the kind of board stall situations, really any stage of the game, to sculpt your draws, get rid of lands you don't need, find lands if you do need them, and just kind of find your most relevant cards more quickly. This card's a really nice one to have access to, and the sort of card that can definitely take over those mid to late game battles when both players are kind of in top deck mode, which is oftentimes what games of Sealed come down to, and oftentimes what games of Draft come down to as well. The final card we are looking at today is Berta, Wise Extrapolator. It is 2 green extrapolator, 2 green blue for a 1/4 legendary creature frog druid. It has increment, so whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana you spent is greater than this creature's power or toughness, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And then whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Berta, add 1 mana of any color. So when you are incrementing, you'll get extra mana as well. And then it has X tap, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token and put X +1/+1 counters on it. So Berta, Wise Extrapolator is another example of one of those cards where if you untap with this card, it's pretty much GG's for your opponent, because you just untap with Berta, and then just every turn you just spend all of your mana making a fractal token. It's almost like the increment stuff is kind of like a trap part. It's oh, you can cast other spells, get some mana, and then use Berta. But if you just play Berta on turn 4, your opponent doesn't kill it. Next turn you untap, play land, and then just go tap Berta, make a 5/5. Next turn, your opponent still doesn't have the kill spell, because if they had the kill spell, they would have killed it already. You untap, play land, tap bird, and make a 6/6. And you just like make so many creatures that your opponent just isn't going to be able to compete, because a 5/5 is like a real card. A 6/6 is a real card. Even like a 4/4 or a 3/3. These are like real like stat lines for creatures that are going to be able to just like trade for cards that your opponent plays. And so it's like drawing like a real card and also playing it every turn, because you're just getting those creatures directly into play. You can also do cool stuff with Berta, like Berta's in play. You cast a 2 mana spell, increment 1, and then like use that mana to like tap Berta and like make a 4. Like, so if you play Berta on turn 4, turn 5 play land, cast 2 drop, make a mana from Berta when it increments up, then tap Berta to make a 4/4. So you can keep playing cards from your hand if you want to, but you can also just activate Berta for the max every single turn, and it's going to be really, really scary. Another thing about Berta is that you can do it at instant speed. So you can just like hold up Berta, and then you just tap it, create a 0/0, and put X counters on it. I mean, you don't necessarily have to do that, but if you have like an instant you're thinking of holding up, then you can do that as well. It's just a really messed up card. If your opponent doesn't kill it, these classic like removal check cards. And like 4 toughness isn't like a low number. There are some removal spells that aren't going to deal enough to kill a 4 toughness creature. And just overall, these classic, like just play a creature. If they don't kill it, you win the game. These are the really kind of scary rares and ones you're going to be really happy to have, especially in those situations where your opponent doesn't have removal, or you have some way to protect it, or you just like get to like untap with it, because when you untap with this, it's going to be very, very good for you. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully you can get these cards in your own events. I'll talk to you next time.